the shooting range. In this episode, the story of Vasily Golubief and his I-16, female pilots in the British Air Force. Hotline. The developers answer questions that you've left in the comments. But first, let's start with the ARL-44 and how it works. One of the most significant machines of the French tank industry was the ARL-44. It combined the most advanced solutions of the time, though it never got to actually fight in the war. Anyway, did the French engineers manage to create a decent alternative to the Tigers and ISs? Let's figure it out. Today, we take a look at the top variant of the ARL-44, an SPG at BR 5.7. At first, this tank seems very clumsy, but it's only a facade. Sure, it looks huge and massive, but it has a very powerful engine. It can speed you up to a maximum 37 kph in no time, and it won't lose the pace, even off-road. Of course, the reverse is much slower, only 4 kph. You also don't have any smoke shells or smoke grenades, so you won't be able to hide behind the grey screen and fall back to safety. As for the armor and durability, this coin has two sides. One of them is, you've got great frontal armor, even with some extra reinforcements. Look at those instruments. On the other side, the sides and the mantlet are very weak. The latter can be pierced by literally anyone from this BR. What now? The engine is this tank's only advantage? Tough chance. Look at this beauty. The 90mm SA-45 weapon with 2 types of ammo and 10 seconds reload. The APCs pierce 180mm from 500 meters, which is pretty impressive. But the best features of this gun are its ballistics and precision. You might have noticed that we mentioned the penetration rate for 500 meters instead of the usual 100. Why? Well, the ARL-44 can survive a close combat, that's true, but its turret rotates pretty slowly, and the armor isn't very durable, so you'll be able to uncover its hidden potential precisely at longer distances. Practice your aim. Become a good sniper, and don't forget to change positions if somebody starts firing back. In urban locations, your task is controlling long streets and other open spaces. Don't forget about the decorators. You can't hide, well, all of you in the nearest trench. What you can do is cover your mantlet or disguise yourself as the ARL-44, ACL-1. The little brother of this machine. For the same reasons, we don't recommend taking this SPG to capture points. You can do that, but remember that your crew literally sits on a lot of explosive things. One hit in the side, and that's it. A very loud it. All in all, this SPG isn't for everybody to enjoy, but if you like dueling at large distances, you'll love this machine. And now let's talk about how one should strike back when facing fear. From the first days of the war, a Soviet fighter pilot, Vasily Golubief, discovered an interesting thing about German pilots. All their planes were equipped with gun cameras. They documented every shot so that afterwards they could count and prove all the aircraft they took down. Another thing that Golubief found out about the Luftwaffe pilots was that they weren't very good at long and intensive dogfights and preferred running away if the threat was becoming too grave. On the other hand, attacking from above, outnumbering the enemy, preferably a damaged one, That's where they were consistently successful. As anybody else would be, right? Of course, there wasn't a lot of chivalry in aerial combat after World War I. Naturally, one of the main weapons of the German pilots was fear. But Golubief was already preparing to strike back. He got his chance on the 12th of March 1942, and he seized it. The Jagdgeschwader 54 had just received the newest Friedrichs, and its pilots had become annoying and active as never before. The Soviet planes were in danger almost every flight. That's why, while flying with his squadron on a usual mission, Golubief only pretended to attack the enemy, saving ammo and rockets. He knew that the Green Hearts would be waiting on the way home. And they were. He saw a couple of hunters looking for their prey down below, outside the anti-aircraft gun reach. Then Golubief sent a signal to his wingman, telling him to stay back. After that, he lost some speed and flew forward, rolling from one wing to the other, making his I-16 look damaged. Of course, the Germans picked him as a target. They boosted towards him, eager to get another frag to their credentials. And it was their final mistake. Captain Golubief suddenly kicked the pedal to the metal and twirled the aircraft practically on its heels, facing his aircraft towards the enemy. The attackers had only half a second to realize that they were doomed. It was impossible to escape the I-16 in a horizontal maneuver, even on the newest Messerschmitt 109F. Both German pilots opened fire, but it was too late. 4 SHKAS guns have already turned Rotenführer Günther Bartlin's aircraft into burning pieces. Terrified, the other pilot, Lieutenant Hermann Leist, tried to escape by going up. But that was exactly what Golubief was waiting for. A wave of RS-82 rockets rushed towards the German aircraft, and the explosions completely ruined the elevating rudder. After a couple of loops, the plane crashed into the ground. Nobody was afraid of the Messerschmitts anymore. A year later, at the beginning of 1943, Vasily Golubief did it again. He shot down 2 of the newest Focke-Wulf 190A4s in his I-16. At that time, the Luftwaffe started actively using these planes against the Royal Air Force, and frightened the British pilots a great deal. The news about a Soviet ace grounding 2 of those on an aircraft used in the Spanish Civil War gave them so much courage that Major Golubief was awarded the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. Golubief's squadron received new planes, the LA-5. Those could be used for a lot of great deeds. But that's a whole different story. And now it's time for a special Pages of History episode in honor of the International Women's Day. Last year, we were talking about female pilots in the US. Now, let's return to Britain. A woman in a pilot's seat? This is outrageous. By the beginning of the war, the British state of mind was still pretty much Victorian, and a single thought about a female was considered an abomination. Even special aviation papers were printing articles saying that women are not qualified or even smart enough to fly anything at all. But these words couldn't face reality anymore. The Luftwaffe bombers were burning English towns to the ground, and almost every man capable of piloting a plane was already doing that. As for the newly formed Air Transport Auxiliary Civilian Organization, that was supposed to fly battle aircraft to their designated airfields, its staff consisted of old and even crippled men. There was no one else left to fly a plane. Then, one of the few British female pilots, Pauline Gower, basically delivered an ultimatum to the government, demanding a creation of an all-female air squadron. Okay, not in the actual RAF. Let it be the civilian ATA. The situation was hopeless. and the government could only say yes. Still, women experienced all sorts of inappropriate jokes and overall bad treatment during the first weeks of service. But then people suddenly realized that women were actually better pilots than men. They had better accident statistics. Like, a lot better. Moreover, there was another strange thing about women. Usually, when a male pilot trained for the new aircraft, he learned a lot of technical data and newly written instructions. At the same time, female pilots relied on their intuition, and it seemed to work. Young Joanne Hughes never flew anything more complicated than a training biplane in her life. Yet, half a year into service, even before she turned 20, she learned to fly almost 50 types of British and American aircraft, including the enormous short Sterling. There were also sisters Yvonne and Joy, who got so good with the Supermarine Spitfire that professional fighter pilots wouldn't dare doing a training combat flight against them as they were too afraid to lose to some girls. Dozens of years later, Joy Loftus, embracing 93 years of her life, that same little Joy, was given a chance to fly a Spitfire again. And so she took to the controls and just took off. There are a lot of stories about women in the ATA. We'll just say that during the years of war, they flew to the front line in hundreds of thousands of planes, consisting of more than 150 models. More than 20 of them died, flying in difficult weather conditions. But the most important thing was that this all-female squadron grew substantially, as it was joined by women from occupied Poland, Czechoslovakia, France, Latin America, Canada, and even Australia. Moreover, for the first time in UK history, women of this division were paid equally with men. When the time came to disband the ATA in December 1945, nobody would think of saying that women couldn't fly. Get ready for the traditional last part of our show, Hotline, developers answering questions from the comments. The first question was asked by a user called Tyler Clark. Hey Gaijin, how did you get the armor values for the tanks being added that are still classified, like the Challenger 1? Do you get them from Street Beasts or something like that, or just make them up yourselves? Hi there. We absolutely do not make anything up. Mostly, if a tank is added to the game, it means that there's enough declassified information to build on. Also, we work with a lot of sources in different countries, like museums, private collectors, and sometimes even government organizations. The second question comes from a player called Nichols. Is this World War game mode gonna come anytime soon, or is it still in its early testing stages? Hi mate, it's actually very close to being finished. We've already announced another wave of tests that include single players and not only complete squadrons. If everything goes well, you'll get this new game mode before the end of the year. Gecko Man Train writes, could I please have a BT-42 to annoy everyone and everything? Hey there, that would be a maybe. You might want to think about your reasons and justifications next time, and we'll think about that BT-42. How's that for a deal? And the last serious question comes from MASH. What's the square root of Russian bias? It's 3.4 gulag plus 12 ounces of stalinium. Don't tell anyone. It's our secret formula. That's it for today, but feel free to write your questions in the comments below. We do read them all, and you might see some of them answered in the next episode. If you like what we're doing, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. See you on the shooting range.